transition in audiology, so from pediatric audiology into the adult world. And I kind of talked about this before, so it's kind of an expansion on that, and I kind of is what drove me to want to make this handbook and a resource for parents and patients to use during the transition process. So why? Why is this important? It's a really stressful time. There are a lot of different things that play a role, and it can make it really challenging for some of these families because they're a little bit unsure. Is it the change in insurance? That can also be hard to figure out. The changing needs of the patient as they become more of an adult, more independent. And then with some of the specialties and the clinic protocols, it can be different. So, you know, as an audiologist, we might see them up until a certain age, but they won't be seen at another clinic because their transition process starts at a different time. So it's a lot of different factors that can be especially challenging, I think. So I was trying to sort of streamline it and put it in a timeline that makes sense for these families and can make it a little bit easier. And why do we need a transition? I kind of talked about that. There's a lot of changing needs. So as you move from middle school, high school, and then to college and working, your needs as somebody with either hearing aids or an implant, that can change because your demands are different. You don't need the FM necessarily anymore, but you might need something that's compatible with your iPhone or that has Bluetooth or whatever. And then mostly it's the when. And the when is the hardest part. So at least at U of M, it doesn't, there's not like a clear cutoff. It's usually based on each provider of when do we stop seeing them in the pediatric clinic and when do they move on to the adult clinic. On the other side, we're also very closely tied with the ear, nose, and throat physicians, and there typically is a really pretty clear cutoff. So we might still be willing to see them, but then their ear, nose, and throat physician might have a different cutoff. So that causes problems with coordination of care and appointments and follow-ups, all that kind of stuff. So these are the current problems. There is no definite age. I've talked to some providers, and it's based on when they bought their last hearing aids. So they will manage them through that hearing aid purchase, and then when they get a new one, then that's the transition time. So it's not necessarily an age, but it's more of the device. Is it when they change insurance, or does it have something to do with anything else? Maybe they're moving, maybe the ear, nose, and throat physician won't see them anymore, so that's when they transition. It's not clear. And it can feel like starting over, so that's what's the most stressful part, is because you're seeing a new professional, they have different expectations, they don't have all of the history. If you've been seeing a pediatric audiologist, it's been every year, sometimes multiple times a year, till you're 18, till you're 20, that's a long time. So it can feel like you're really just at square one all over again. And that should be a process that's discussed really early. The transition doesn't need to happen early, but it should be talked about through all of the appointments, just to kind of set the groundwork, really focus on the important process and the steps that need to happen in order to make it go smoothly. And the changes in the insurance is really the big one, which I think changes the expectations from these appointments and for the patients. So, like adult insurance usually doesn't cover anything for hearing aids, whereas a pediatric patient, if you have children's special health care, for example, you get new hearing aids every 5 years, and that's just kind of covered, including the batteries, ear molds, everything. If you go to an adult and you have adult insurance, you have to pay out of pocket for all of those things. And sometimes I don't think that's always clear until you really get to that step, and it's like, oh wait, what's going on here? The other thing is some of the appointments aren't covered either. You might get hearing aids, you might get fit, but then if you want to come and see me every year, that costs extra. So before you're kind of used to seeing your pediatric audiologist every 6 months, no problem, then it changes. So this is what I want to, possible solutions. So that's why I wrote a handbook. So it talks about insurance, it talks about what to expect during the transition process, it talks about the different expectations for when you go from pediatric to adult, and really the transition process starts at like the age of 14, 13. Promoting independence, if they can go back to the hearing test by themselves, encourage them to actually know what their hearing loss is, what it means, and what they use, and encourage questions. Hold on. Pediatric audiologists can help you really kind of make that your process. by encouraging that independence, that kind of stuff. And they can help you find another audiologist, especially when you go away to college. That's the most important part, finding somebody who's local. So if there's an emergency, you can just kind of pop right in there. And your current audiologist kind of help fill them in on what you're wearing, what you need, that kind of stuff. And this is, so I included this in here. It's something that you fill out with your pediatric audiologist to know, what is my hearing loss? What does it mean? Why is that important? What have I been wearing? What do I like about my hearing aid? What do I not like? And it's really just kind of taking ownership of that. So in the future, what I would really like to do, which would be ideal, is to make a transition group. So if you are on that transition path, that you would meet as a group, talk about the process with a pediatric audiologist and somebody in the adult clinic to really set those expectations and kind of really put you forward. And expanding on this booklet, but I was kind of wondering if you guys have any suggestions for other things that you think would be helpful, especially if you've ever seen, somebody go through this process. So here's some resources. Okay, there you go. 2 minutes over.
There's a few minutes left for questions or suggestions.
Yes.
Just a comment on another resource. In the pediatric world, and in the world of special healthcare needs, you've got the GOT transition, so it looks like you've really incorporated a lot of the 6 elements of GOT transition into this, but boiled it down from many, many pages to pretty straightforward.
But you need to
nice
know.
job.
Yeah. I didn't want to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
I don't have any suggestions, but I think once you're done with this, the group would appreciate getting it.
Yes, absolutely.
Is the Epic system used in college?
It can be, but I personally haven't worked with any patients who are in college who use it very often. But it's definitely an option, and it can be an accommodation.
Okay.
But in the colleges, they also will have like HART, so the transcription services and other accommodations. But it's definitely, it can be in the realm of availability.
Seems like it'd be really helpful.
Good.
My family resource presentation, and I wanted to address the challenge that occurs when a child has hearing loss, have hearing aids or cochlear implant, and they're not wearing it full time. And it's an issue that I saw pretty frequently at both the pediatric clinic and on the cochlear implant team. And I think it's something that is really hard to address in the clinical setting. And even when you are able to talk about it with the family, you never really know how much they are able to retain, and it's hard to give them resources on the fly. And so my plan is to make this informational packet. There's 3 versions of it that are going around. They're very, very similar. And I'll talk to you about what the differences are, but it's something that you can actually send home with the family if they're having this problem, and it gives them the resources that they need. And this is really important, I think, because a huge thing that we hammer with audiology, especially in the pediatric setting, is early identification of hearing loss, but that's really only part of the goal. You want to identify it early so that you can intervene early, and if you fit them with a hearing aid, you fit them with cochlear implant, they're not wearing it full time, you haven't really reached your goal. It's not helping the child like it could be. And it's really different than adult patients. Adult patients, you can fit them with a hearing aid, you can sit them down and say, look, you need to wear this full time. If you don't, you're not going to get the benefit from it. You can't make the child accountable for that, especially if they're a multiply involved child, and you can't always assume that the families are going to have that time and that energy to work through the challenge in a successful way. And so to put together this packet, for the past year I've been kind of paying attention to the audiologist's reaction when this is an issue. I've talked with audiologists at Michigan. I'm a student from Purdue, so I have connections back at Purdue. Also, it's really fun when parents come in and they have solved the problem for their child and they're really excited and they want to share what they did. And so some of those solutions are in here as well. I also did a pretty good online review, I think, that looks at specific retention options, educational resources that the family can go to, and as well as kind of addressing the behavioral psychological approach to the behavior of the child not keeping the device on. And so like I said, there's 3 versions of the packet going around. Just because you're giving them a lot of information, you don't want any of it to be redundant or not pertinent to their situation. So a packet that's specifically for a child with cochlear implant, a packet specific for children with hearing aids, and then bimodal, so sometimes a child will have a cochlear implant in one ear and a hearing aid in the other ear. So the difference between the packages in the first couple pages, it talks about physical retention options, and because of the size and the shape of the device, that just changes. And it changes a little bit when you're talking to them about how important it is for full-time use for a child with a hearing aid versus a child that needs a cochlear implant. And so there's 3 different versions, and I would think it would be cool to have it available in the clinic. At Michigan, there's a shared drive that I've seen a lot of audiologists log in and use, and they'll print off different resources. And I think that'd be a really easy way to make it accessible. And I think it's important to think about when to approach this with the family. They get a ton of information and a ton of things at their initial visit when they're going home with the device. And at that point, you don't actually know if it's going to be a challenge. So I don't think that's the time to give it to them. I would keep an eye on it. There's a lot of follow-up in that first year after you fit a device. And I think if you see that problem occurring, that's something that you can approach the family with. And you can send them home with this. I think it's a pretty straightforward, easy to understand packet of information. And then you can also just have it available if it becomes a problem later. And so this is just an outline of the packet because there's only 3 of them going around. And so I address the importance of full-time use, different options of retention. I really tried to find a lot of different options online. And all of them go past what just comes home from the manufacturer, because the manufacturer does provide some solutions, but you don't want that in the packet because the family already has that. I also have a few pages that are suggestions for addressing the behavior when the child doesn't want to wear their devices, because a lot of times you can't really work through that challenge unless you are able to address the behavior. There's also a lot of options for personalization of the device and kind of helping the child make it something that they're proud to wear, something that's their own, that they identify with. Part of that is finding resources, finding toys and different things that the child sees in their life that really celebrates hearing loss and shows them that they're not completely alone and they're not totally different than everybody else. And then my last page has some online resources for support groups, retention options, and reviews from real families that have worked through different options and what they thought was good and what they thought was good based on how old their child was at the time. And other articles for families that are more motivated to do all that research. So yeah, that's it.
So Brittany and I's family project, our kiddo has hearing loss and he wears a pilot cap, but his mom, that was one of the resources that she wanted, was stuff with hearing loss. So could we have access to
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you envision this, and this goes to Claire as well, are these print documents, working, electronic documents that can be updated, or?
Yeah, I was thinking it would be a print document that maybe you have a couple copies in clinic. I have it saved as a Word document, and the very last page, the one that has the online resources that I think would be the most likely to change as time goes on, it's not a full page. I kind of did that on purpose because I didn't want to overwhelm the family with information, and as different things come and go, you can add and change to that. So that's why I thought that, I don't know if it's different as.
Yeah, I would just say as the Director of Pediatric Audiology at Michigan, I'm hoping that both of these resources will be available for us to distribute to families. So we're proud of their work. Good job.
Anything else?
I love your pictures of the.
Oh, thank you. I was glad I was able to find a color printer this week. Okay.
Here's just a real quick gist, if you will. It's a lot more complicated than what I'm going to be describing it as, but just so you guys all have a general understanding. So it is a wireless system that is designed to help that individual identify and under speech in a noisy situation. So a classroom, right? And it can actually work in distances up to 50 feet. So there are 3 components that
are kind of important when we're talking about an FM system. One, there needs to be a transmitter, which is on the screen. It says phone app right there. And then on this little model here, it's on her belt right here. And then two, we need a microphone. So that's that boom mic right there. It could be a lapel mic that can clip to your shirt. And actually this new one right over here actually has microphones built in to that transmitter. And then finally, it needs a receiver. So something to clip to that hearing aid or that cochlear implant device so it can stream directly to that patient's ear or the child's ear. So, how it works. Kind of already touched on this. The teacher wears the FM transmitter. The microphone picks up my voice, right? And then is going to send that signal directly to that kiddo with those hearing aids in that FM system. So, I actually am currently at an educational audiology off-campus placement at the Saginaw Intermediate School District, and there have been numerous times that we go in to see a kiddo and they're not wearing the teacher's not wearing the personal transmitter FM, and it's like, well, that's not going to really do anything, right? And then teachers don't know basic troubleshooting skills for hearing aids or cochlear implants. Oftentimes we come in just to do a simple fix when really if we could just educate those teachers, that would help kind of close that gap. And then again, there's a lack of teacher professional knowledge for, well, why do they even need to wear an FM? I actually had a teacher tell my supervisor and we don't use it because I don't really see the need for that. So, there are some important considerations that I just want to touch on. A study found that 90% of special educators did not feel prepared to assist students when they have problems with cochlear implants. That's just basic troubleshooting. And then 75% of those educators didn't feel prepared in that same sense to assist students with FM systems, which is huge. Not all schools have educational audiology services. And there's, again, that lack of teacher and administrative knowledge about hearing. What is it? Why do we need these FM systems? So kind of to give you a little visual, if you will, say a lot of times my voice is the same loudness level, if you will, as the classroom noise, okay? So with a kiddo with hearing loss, what happens is they don't know how to differentiate, if you will, between, well, the noise or that speech signal that I should be hearing. So what an FM does is kind of boost that signal up so it goes directly to that kiddo. And then there has been research that has shown that children perform better in noise with the use of a hearing aid or cochlear implant with the FM system, rather than just that hearing aid or cochlear implant alone. So what I did is I actually created resources for teachers. Carissa, is it on my laptop? Could you pass that around for me? But anyway, it's just, there are 3 different cochlear implant manufacturers, Advanced Bionics, Cochlear, and MED-EL. And what I did is it kind of gets confusing because they're all different parts for each manufacturer. So I went ahead and I just did basic setup, and then I did, well, how do you connect an FM system to those cochlear implant instruments? And then listening checks. You'd be surprised that not every teacher or teacher consultant or aide will do a listening check in the morning to verify, oh, is this even working before we start the day. So, and it corresponds with each different component for each manufacturer. So that was nice. And then just some basic troubleshooting skills that I came up with. So it's all right there. And I think I might be at my 5-minute mark, am I? Okay, and lastly, I have links for teachers that I'm going to send out to do a in-service at the Saginaw ISD. So that way they can really understand why those FM systems are important. And I believe Sarah showed that initial video as well. So thank you guys.
Cool.
We have 5 minutes for Q&A.
Can you send the link that you send out to us?
Yeah, sure.
I just, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely.
As a resource.
For sure. Go ahead, whoever.
Can these be plugged into plain headphones?
Yeah, so actually there is a way that that FM system can go into headphones. I actually did see a kiddo that was given a standardized test and she has hearing loss, and
they played it through audio and didn't have her FM system. So really, it's not a test of her ability, it's a hearing test, right? And she had a high frequency hearing loss, which is those female voices and those consonants. So she really wasn't even being tested on that true knowledge. So yes, they can. Go ahead.
Can two children link up to one, like
Mhm.
children in a class?
Yep, so that's the beauty of it, is that there are multiple receivers that can connect to one transmitter. And the idea is that it kind of gets a little more complicated in that sense that there are these channels that are constantly bouncing off back and forth from that channel to the kiddo, and then making sure that that connection is strong, and then for the other kiddo, and then the other kiddo. And then if something goes wrong, they kind of bounce between to find a new one.
So do they have to have the same exact like model and brand for that to work?
No, it's typically, for the schools, it's typically only one manufacturer, so, and that's the manufacturer that I was talking about, so.
Do you mostly work in like an elementary school?
So I actually go to both. I'm in Freeland, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that area, and that's where the hearing impaired program is. And I also am like based, if you will, at a school where we see a lot of kiddos referrals from early on, so.
Because I've seen a lot, like with some of the older kids, once they leave elementary school, it's really a lot more challenging with the FM, and they oftentimes will end up using it, just because it's an echo, and they just feel like it's worth it.
Right, yeah, and then that's kind of when that switch happens, I feel, that they switch to a different technology, the Roger, like the Roger Pen. So to help with that, it's something that they can kind of keep with them and just give the teacher themselves, and it's a little thing, literally like a pen, that the teacher can wear, and then they can set it down, so if they're in a group setting, it switches the directionality. So rather than focusing on my voice in this mode, if I turn the microphone like this, it would actually pick up some of you guys. So in small group, that would be beneficial.
How many channels are open per device?
You know,
Roger's digitized, there's no channels.
yep. So I'm pretty sure, I want to say maybe up to like 30, there can be kids on one device.
So does that mean if you wanted to expand from say 5 to 10, then you would have to pay the manufacturer more?
No, it's all equipped for that. So the only thing that would be needed in that sense, we wouldn't need another transmitter, we would just need a receiver specifically for that kiddo to plug into their hearing instrument. Okay, yeah.
So I have a question. My daughter has hearing loss.
Definitely.
And the FM system is something that you never used in her school, something that's continually talked about in audiology, but then nothing ever happens. She's going in 8th grade next year. And I've never heard of that pen thing that you're talking about, so I don't know if it's the, and I, obviously as a parent, it's something I've let drop off, it's not, because I've got her has multiple issues, not just hearing loss, so I kind of travel around on what we're doing and dealing with most. But we're really working on sort of compliance with wearing them right now, and I don't know, like, the schools just choose, oh, we're not going to do it, if the parents are going to, they feel like they don't need to do it, and what is this pen? Is that something that families get, or?
I believe typically they have to get it through the school. There's kind of a issue, like the kiddos can't take the FM system home.
Right, I do know
That's that idea that it stays there.
I understand.
But as far as, how old is she?
13. I'm having our IEP next week, so.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring this to make sure it's in the
Krista, how
IEP.
would she go about, because I was thinking children's special health, but.
So,
Well, I
yeah,
think
the
the IEP
audiologist
did.
would recommend it at your next visit, if you went in and had her evaluated, they could recommend an FM system.
They always do.
And then that would
And I
help.
take that, make.
What's her school district? Sorry,
Sarton County.
Oh.
Oh, what, I'm sorry, what
Clinton.
Clinton, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
she's in DeWitt Public Schools, so she's not at the ISG.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it is an educational audiologist in DeWitt. I think
There
it's.
it is.
So I would try to get in contact with her because that's kind of where that connection would be. And they should be doing that because if it's in the IEP that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
out to you guys. I printed off 20 copies, and that's definitely not enough, so I apologize.
Trainees.
Okay, so trainees, this is a copy of the travel grant that I just submitted, so hopefully I get that grant. But that's kind of gonna go over everything that we go over today. Yeah, if I don't. Oh. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Embryonic Nicotine Exposure Alters Glial Cells in the Auditory Vestibular Hindbrain. So quite a mouthful. Since September of 2015, I worked in a research lab with frogs. And going into the research, I didn't have a strong biology background, but I've certainly learned a lot. And I've learned how time intensive and how patient you have to be when doing this sort of research. So I'm going to share with you guys today what we just completed. Okay, so a quick background. We know that prenatal nicotine exposure creates harmful effects for the offspring. So research has shown that maternal cigarette use can cause behavioral, learning, and cognitive deficits. And this is likely due to nicotine's ease and ability to cross the placental and blood-brain barriers. So again, this research has all been very well established. Furthermore, my supervisor, Barty Kabamna, she did a really interesting study where she looked at pregnant women's placenta, and they found that those children had cochlear, peripheral, and nervous system damage, and the genes that they looked at in the placenta correlated to the genes within the children's hearing loss. So it was a really interesting study. But overall, there's a wealth of information regarding nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, but there's a dearth of information regarding glial cells, and that's where my research steps in. So, specifically, I was looking at connexin 43, which is a gap junction protein, and essentially what it does is facilitates migration of newly born nerve cells to their final places of destination. So, the purpose of my study was to determine how embryonic nicotine exposure influences connexin 43 appearance in the developing hindbrain, and determine if it produces developmental auditory vestibular deficits in the frog model, the Xenopus laevis model. So briefly, our methods, we had 3 groups: control, 20, and 40 micrograms per ml of nicotine. They were exposed for 96 hours or 4 days, and then they were assayed on day 6. They were euthanized, fixed, processed, sectioned, and stained with the connexin 43 antibody. They were then photographed and analyzed. So these are our results. The 20 microgram group showed no morphological changes compared to the control animal. So we look at the first figure. A is the control specimen, B is 20, C is 40. So you can tell between A and B, there's essentially no difference between the two. However, if we look at the 40 microgram specimen, they were much shorter, so significantly smaller overall. They had a ton of swelling and a range of craniofacial anomalies, including acorn-shaped eyes versus the rounded eye. They had malformed mouths, which looked like a cleft under the scope, and malformed ears as well. They also had reduced or absent connexin 43 and ventricular enlargement and hindbrain reduction. So if you look at the next figure, again, A is our control. B and C are both 40 microgram specimens. So we're looking at the hindbrain of the frog. So within the ventricular zone, you can see these dark, this is also in the handout, these dark clusters, that's connexin. If we look at B, 40 microgram, there's no connexin clusters within the ventricular zone, and there's reduced connexin staining in the neural pill. And then C, we can see that the ventricle overall is enlarged, hindbrain was reduced. Those were our results. So the conclusions of the study were that embryonic nicotine exposure in the Xenopus model produces neural and craniofacial anomalies. The anomalies are associated with the reduction in the hindbrain size and ventricular enlargement, suggesting cell death, which is analogous to what we see in a number of neurodegenerative diseases. Nicotine induced reduction in absence of connexin 43
across the entire hindbrain, likely explains the craniofacial deficits, because as I mentioned earlier, Connexin 43's job is to facilitate that migration of nerve cells to their final place of destination. But with the craniofacial anomaly, we aren't getting that migration. So why is this important? Nicotine exposure during pregnancy impacts the development of the CNS, including the auditory system. We now know that nicotinic acetylcholine receptors and glial cells are both impacted, which has implications not only for hearing loss, but neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. A recent CDC report showed that 12 to 20% of pregnant women smoke, which is entirely preventable. So with more education, resources, and a strong support system, we can likely decrease this number and reduce any adverse side effects in the offspring of these women. So what's next? I'm going to be presenting this information at AAA on April 20th, hence why we're presenting today, because we won't be at the final shebang. And then this is also going to be the foundation for future research to understand how e-cigarettes damage the central nervous system. So my research provided a nicotine dose response curve, and now we're going to add propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, the e-cigarette constituents, to see how that impacts the central nervous system. Wow. Those are my researches. Okay, any questions? I'm not a biologist, so.
This is just a basic one. I don't know anything about frog research. How do you expose them to nicotine?
That's a great question. So with the e-cigarette, my supervisor was trying to determine if we could somehow like vape the frog. You can't really vape a frog. So what we do is we dilute the nicotine in their water. So they breathe their letter wine, and so they're just breathing the nicotine. And we actually, we just sent in some specimens up to MSU because we want to know how much nicotine is actually in their bodies and what that correlates to the human. So I was really hoping that that research would be here in time for today, but we'll get that probably next week or the week after. Good question. Any other questions?
Fascinating and important.
Yeah. It's been really fun. I love working with the frogs. It really is.
It does take a lot of patience, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it took a ton of time to get that dose response curve, and that's partially why I've become much more appreciative and patient throughout the process. Okay. Oh, sure, sorry.
Oh, I was just curious. So you saw like significant effects at 40, what was it, micrograms, but not 20. Do you think that there's a threshold that lies somewhere in between there where it's almost safe or you're not going to see real differences?
So that's part of the trouble, and that's part of the reason why it took so long to get our dose response curve. Typically with teratogens such as nicotine, you see kind of a bell response. So nothing, nothing, nothing. At 40, we saw this huge impact, and then above that, it's almost tapers off again. So it took a really long time to figure out where that threshold was, and we finally discovered it. But yeah, so that answered your question.
Do you have some sort of, I don't know, kind of like analogous data? Like is 40 micrograms supposed to be like a pack a day?
That's what we, the research we just sent up to MSU, we'll get that information hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Because yeah, we don't exactly know what that means in the human right now, so.
And I'd be interested too with humans, if it's the smoking themselves, there could also be secondhand smoke exposure too, so that it's.
Yeah, second and third hand smoke with offspring has been a really hot topic too, so that's to come. Okay.
And then there are 4 presenters.